Hello and welcome to what is going to be my humble attempt at creating a tutorial series for the behemoth that is Crusader Kings 2. It is quite the undertaking to try and explain something like this game, and in fact this is going to be my second attempt at recording the first couple of videos. I've already done several episodes for the series, and I'm just looping back to record the first few to tidy up the content and perhaps make the audio a little bit better. Just to give an idea of who this is for, originally I started recording this series because a couple of my friends asked me how to play Crusader Kings 2, and I kind of gave them a little bit of an overview in person without the game running, and frankly that just isn't enough. To give you an idea of my experience level, I'm about 100 hours into this game, so by Paradoxian standards I am still very new to the game. I hope that doesn't put you off. I think I've got a pretty firm grasp of how the mechanics work, and like I said, depending on audience-wise, I think if you are brand new to this game, or if you've had Crusader Kings 2 in your Steam library or other platform of choice for a while now, and have perhaps booted it up a couple of times, been hugely intimidated by all of the menus and tooltips and frankly mind-boggling feudal mechanics, then this is definitely the series I hope for you. I believe I can do a really good job of explaining that and getting the key points across. If conversely you are a Crusader Kings 2 veteran with 1,000 hours in the game, I'm not entirely sure why you're watching a tutorial series, but then again, far be it from me to judge. I may get some things wrong. I'm not, like I said, an absolute expert, and I'm definitely not a min-maxer. I'm not somebody who seeks to extract every little tiny advantage out of the game. I'm much more of a role player. With that said, it's probably worth pointing out that because I'm teaching a game, it will be very mechanic heavy. The story is kind of yours to tell. So yeah, I mean, whilst I'm more of a role player, I'll be talking very heavily about how things work. I try and give an idea of how they fit within the setting. But yeah, it's going to be largely me saying, you do this when this happens, and stuff like that. So without further ado, let's start out. So it's probably worth pointing out I have all of the DLC currently for this game. There are other videos already out there on the internet that will do a very good job of explaining what DLC currently exists for Crusader Kings 2, which ones are considered to be almost mandatory, and which ones are perhaps not. I currently have them all enabled with the exception of Sunset Invasion, and the reason for that is it can do some crazy things with Aztecs invading Europe, and can, whilst being very cool, be a bit game breaking, so I've left that to be switched off for now. But the rest of them, some of them are really good, really useful. Holy Fury was a great example of that, whereas some of them are perhaps a little bit more flavoursome, although, like I said, I'm more of a role player, so flavour's really good. Anyway, at risk of waffling on the menu screen, let's click the single player button, and you can see I actually have a save going, because I've been doing already doing the playthrough. Like I said, this is the second run through. So I'm going to click on New Game in this instance, which obviously you'll be doing if you're following along for the first time, and your start dates will depend upon your DLC. I don't off the top of my head know which DLCs enable which start date, but I'm going to pick the earliest. You could pick whichever one you want. It's not going to mechanically change what I teach you, it's just going to change the layout of the game. So we're not going to play with any of these buttons down here. We're just going to literally select the main portrait for the era. So I'm going to pick the early Middle Ages, and we could pick any of these really powerful characters here. So these are kind of what the game recommends as interesting characters who were important at the time period, who are frankly powerful. Again, we're not going to play as any of those. So we're just going to click Custom Game Setup, which will show us the entire map. And at this point, I'm just going to zoom in by scrolling with my mouse wheel. And we're going to head all the way down here to this nice snowy mountainous region. And you can see Schwiss and Chur and Thurgau. So we're going to click once on Thurgau. And then if you notice in the top right, we can see King Carling. He's an important character. We could play as him, but that's too easy. Let's click again on Thurgau, and now we can see Count Bethelio of Thurgau. So if we hover over the difficulty, we can see that this is rated as being 79%, which is very hard. Base score 50%, count plus 20, vassals minus 1%, small dynasty plus 10%. If you're new to this, none of that means anything to you, and therefore you can completely ignore it. This is basically telling you playing this kind of character is hard. You could play as somebody important, and it would be easy. If we click again, we can see that the difficulty of playing as King Carloman of Middle Francia is 28%, easy, and that's because he's already a king. He's already super powerful. So I'm just going to launch into the game by selecting Count Bethelio again, and then we'll do a little bit more of explaining things. Setup wise, like I said, I have all the DLCs enabled. If you would like to get achievements, you need to enable Iron Man. I currently have it disabled just so that I can make saves during this tutorial period. It makes it easier for me to skip back and forth and show you guys what's going on. But likewise, if you would like to get your achievos, then put your Iron Man on. It's a lot of fun, actually, living with the consequences. But for now, let's click Start Game. So, once we load up, we get a little bit of Welcome to Crusader Kings 2. Click Next on there. And it just gives us a little bit of a rundown of where we sit within the world. So it's telling us that we're German, we're Catholic, and we're feudal. And those three things matter for the game. I think we'll probably go much deeper into the explanation of what that means as we progress with the tutorial series. But for now, just know that German is our culture, so that will affect things like whether or not people like us. They'll consider us foreign, for instance, if we're a different culture to them. Feudal means the type of society or laws and governance that we exist within. So being feudal means that we exist in a very hierarchical structure. There are people above and below us in positions, and based on where we sit very much changes the power dynamic of how things work. We're going to go much more into detail in that because it's an absolute core fundamental part of the game. And then Catholicism is the religion that's within the game, or one of the religions, I should say, that's in the game. And of course, for this period of history, Catholicism is the main Christian faith. The game's called Crusader Kings 2, so it's all about crusading, or at least there's a large chunk of it that's about crusading, and that. Again, we'll go more into detail about that as well, I think, when we progress the series. Ironically, the religion side of things is something I've not played with anywhere near as much as other aspects of the game, but it is a core part of it, so we will be discussing it. But for now, let's just close this. And let's give you an idea of what it is that you're looking at. So, first up, you're playing a Paradox Interactive title. So, if you have played any other Paradox Interactive titles, be they Stellaris or Victoria or Hearts of Iron, or Europa Universalis, all of those, a lot of the mechanics that hold true in those games are kind of present here in one form or another. So it'll be beneficial if you played some of those games. Some of these concepts will be familiar to you. If you haven't, don't worry, I'm going to try and explain everything as if you don't know what this is. So like I said, originally I was recording this for some friends, but I thought, hey, you know what, why not make the opportunity to kind of share this with the world? If it ends up being useful even to a handful of people, then most the better. So right now what we can see is the world map. We can use our scroll wheel to scroll in and out of the world, and we can see that we were zoomed in right on this nice snowy mountainous region because we exist here in Thurgau. Now, this is generally not the way that most players will view the world. Most players will view the world through the realm map mode, and you can access this by pressing the W key on your keyboard. Or, alternatively, you can press this little button down here, bottom right-hand side. Terrain is the one that we were on. It also has the shortcut of Q. So that's what you got when you loaded the game. And then just along from there, there's a little shield that says Realms. If we click that button, that's switched to the Realm view. So what are you seeing now? So now you're seeing the world as divided by the top-level titles. And the realms that exist for those top-level titles. Which already is something that we now need to go and describe, because it's a whole concept. So, what is a title, and certainly what is a top-level title? Well, this is a game about feudal society, and that means that there is a hierarchy, there's a definite order to things, and right now, it perhaps be easiest if we explain it from the bottom upwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to click up here in the very top left. There is a little portrait of a dashing young man. I say young, he's 41 years old. You can take that as young or old, depending on your outlook on life. In this period of history, he's already fairly well lived. Getting to the age of 60 or 70 in this game is doing pretty well. People didn't live that long back then. So you can live older, by the way, but there's an element of randomness, and also as characters get older, they're much more likely to die. Well, let's click for now on Count Bathilio of Thurgau, and let's close this little screen. Some of it's useful, actually. Let's reopen it. The Paradox titles are full of pop-ups and tooltips. And they are actually very useful, particularly if you're learning the game. And this game is chock full of them. They are not always 100% accurate, because I think Paradox forgets to update them through the different patches, but I would say 98-99% of the time that they're pretty good. So certainly if you're learning the game, there is enough information in there for you to scan through and work out what it is that you're kind of reading. So I'll let you read this at your leisure. It might be difficult to see off the video because I'm recording. I'm running off a widescreen monitor. But when you're playing the game, just read the things that get presented to you by the game. They're a really good way of learning. I'm going to point you to the things that are the most important. But yes, there's detail in there that you can really get to grips with. So let's close that for now because it's kind of distracting. Let's have a look at Count Bathilio of Thurgau. That is the character that we are currently playing this game as. That's who we are. But this game isn't just about a single character. This game is about a dynasty. So what does that mean? That means that our family is really what this game is about. And charting the success or downfall of that family is really where all of the stories come from in this game. So we've got the portrait of Count Bathilio, and then to the left of Count Bathilio we have a shield that has a coat of arms or a crest or a what's the other word? Kind of like insignia, or any words that you like for. Basically, it shows us his house. It shows us who he is and what he's about. And right now, that crest is his primary title. His primary title is the County of Thurgau, which is this county here. So if I zoom in on it, so this is what we clicked when we were creating the game. This is his primary title, the thing that Count Bathilio is associated with. And inside of his primary county, he has a number of holdings. So he has Rheineck, which is his county capital, so that has a castle inside of it, and that's where you can imagine that Count Bathilio lives. That's, if we hover here, it says current capital. So that's where we are currently based, where we administer our realm from. There are also a number of other holdings. I think we'll go into talking about holdings a bit later on. But for now, just be aware that a county has holdings inside it, be they castles or cities or churches, and each holding kind of performs a different function, but it's a core place where characters exist and where resources come from. So that is where Thurgow is. If we can get back to Count Bethelio by clicking on his portrait here, or we can click it in the top left again. And you notice there's a whole bunch of shields here. We're going to go into more detail about what the shields mean in a later video. For now, let's click on the Count Bethelio again, just to go back to what is the character screen. And we can see that Count Bethelio has... there's a whole heap of things, and we're going to basically use this episode to kind of describe most of the user interface to you, just so you can at least have this as a basic set of knowledge to understand what you're looking at. So his house is House Bethilding, and this is his family crest. So this is a dynastic crest. Like we said, this is the primary title. This is Count Bethelio himself. In the top right, we can see a little tiny portrait, and this represents our liege, Count Bethelio's liege, which is Duke Hanibi of Alemania. We can click on that, and that will take us to our liege. We're going to talk more about that in just a moment. For now, let's just go back to Count Bethelio. Underneath Count Bethelio, we can see another little portrait, and that is an heir. So that is our son. So again, we can hover over that portrait and get a tooltip which gives us more information, and yeah, that's our son. That is the character who is part of our family and the person who is designated to succeed us upon our death. So like I said, this game is about dynasties, not single characters. In the event that we die, the game isn't over so long as we have a character that fulfills this little portrait here, so long as we have an heir, be that a man or a woman, or indeed a boy or a girl, because children can succeed at their peril. They're not as good as adults for ruling kingdoms, but they can succeed. So that's the majority of this section here. Then over here we've got a whole bunch of stats. So some of these are replicated in the top right over here. So like domain size, you can see that here and here. Top right of the screen and on Count Bethelio. We also have vassal limit. We don't need to worry about vassal limit just yet. We'll describe that a bit later on in the game, I think. We have army levies. Army levies are extremely important. They represent the amount of troops. On a really basic level, right now, let's call them troops. How many troops Count Bethelio can call to arms to fight. The more troops you have, the more powerful you are, the more powerful people that you can take on, and the less likely somebody is going to want to take you on, and therefore the more powerful your realm could theoretically become. And obviously, like I said, this game is about a dynasty, and making that dynasty as powerful as you can possibly imagine is kind of the crux of this game. We have wealth, again, that's displayed in the top right as well. That's gold, how much gold your character's got. Prestige, that's again measured in the top right, because it's measured for the character, but it's also kind of part of how the realm interacts. Prestige is, how do you describe prestige? It's kind of the way people view you and the kind of amazing deeds that you've done. You're prestigious if you've accomplished a great many things, or like say you've won many battles, that can make you prestigious, or you've completed a journey that people talk about, just like accomplishments that make people stare at you in awe. That would kind of be the best way to describe prestige. And then lastly, piety, which is quite essentially how you... Whoops. Sorry, that was my virus scanner there. Which is basically how much you are loved by God. In fact, again, you can hover over these and you get tooltips for each one to give you an idea. But yeah, when I say loved by God, I mean loved by the godly people of the mortal realms. So how much the church or people think that you like the church. And piety can be used. All of these are basically resources. You can spend most of these. You obviously can't spend domain size or vassal limit. Or indeed army levies. They're how much you have of something, whereas the wealth, prestige, and piety have in-game effects for just being accrued, but can also be expended to achieve things. I guess theoretically you could also say that army levies do that because you can expend soldiers to grow your realm. But just vassal limit is just how many vassals you have, and domain size is just how big your realm is. For now, we'll go into more detail on that later. Yes, so below that we have the stats for a character, and just briefly we'll describe what they are. So the scroll is state diplomacy, the 2 swords is state martial, the treasure chest is state stewardship, the little dagger and envelope is state intrigue, the little book is state learning, and then at the bottom we've got like a little sword and shield, and that represents personal combat. Each of these values represents how on the left, so there are 2 sets of values, one in brackets and one not. The ones that are on the left that are not in brackets represent our personal stats. So we have an 8 in diplomacy, or we do at the moment, 16 in martial, 4 in stewardship, 7 in intrigue, 0 in learning, and 36 in personal combat. The reason I say in the moment is because Count Bethelio is this character will always exist in this start. So if you start in 776 or 769, sorry, then you will always be able to select Count Bethelio in Thurgau. But Count Bethelio himself is not a fixed character. When you click on him and you press play, he gets his stats randomly generated. So he always has this portrait, he always has this son with this name and this portrait, but their stats get completely randomly generated. So in this particular playthrough, or at least in this particular clicking of play, it turns out that Count Bethelios came out with a really, really good marshal. He would make a pretty damn good commander. He also has a really good personal combat score, which would mean that he would be really good fighting one-on-one with people. He's terrible at learning, which means he's not at all bookish. He wouldn't be very good at tutoring someone. He is 10 is, so I guess this is worth pointing out, 10 is an average stat, 20 is a really good stat, and anything greater than 20 is pretty damn good. So what we can read from that is that we're just below average in diplomacy, which is the measure of how you are perceived by other realms and other characters. So having a high diplomacy score can make people like you, and being liked is important. We'll go into more of that later. Martial, again, leading armies. Stewardship, how good you are with money and administering the things that it takes to administer a realm, be it like money and contracts and all sorts of stuff like that. Intrigue is plots, spying, murdering people, underhand, skullduggery, basically. And yeah, learning's like tutoring people, and then personal combat score we've already described. So those stats are generated, and they are bound to Count Bethelio. They are part of him as a character. Some of them have been influenced by the things over here on the left, which are the traits. So we can see that he has got the trait of brilliant strategist. That's what's giving him the vast majority of his martial, in fact. And you can read in the tooltip, he's getting +9 martial, +2 intrigue, +2 stewardship, -1 learning, +0.5 health, and +20 to his personal combat score. He's also a direct leader, which would actually make him really good at leading armies from the center, which is a trait that we'll discuss later. In later videos, we didn't get this good a role for Count Bethelio when I started this tutorial series. He's a bad commander. he's got a really bad personal combat score, really bad martial, and the rest of his stats are really not great either. So this is actually a much better role. If you want to make sure you get the best character, you could literally just load and you could just literally restart the game until you get a good role. I kind of would encourage you not to do that, because part of the fun of this game is taking a character and just working with what you're given, and just don't worry about it. Just play, see what happens, and you end up with some great stories. So yeah, you can see from his traits, he has the trait humble, and that's actually one of the 7 virtues. And he also has the trait deceitful, which is not actually a vice. So you have virtues and you have sins, deadly sins. So you think of like the 7 deadly sins, like greed, wrath, lust. They're also like the 7 virtues. So you've got like humble or kind or like things like that. And they're generally polar opposites of one another. Virtues are green and deadly sins are red. They are not necessarily good or bad. They just, you get different positives and negatives depending on the trait. So you can see humble is really good in terms of it gives us monthly piety, and it means that anybody who shares the same trait of us gets +5. But if they have the opposite trait of us, then they would suffer a negative 5. So somebody who's prideful, for instance, would not like us because they don't like humble people because they're prideful, and vice versa. But yeah, they're not necessarily good or bad. It really depends. And then you have these traits that don't have a colour as well. So you've got like stubborn and gregarious here. And you can see gregarious just is all round good. There's really nothing bad about being gregarious. You get +2 to diplomacy, +5 to attraction opinion, +5 to vassal opinion. Again, don't worry about any of these little stats at this stage. I'm just kind of reading them out in case you can't read them. And by that I mean because I'm playing in widescreen and the text might appear small, not because I'm assuming you can't read. And stubborn, I guess stubborn is a really good example. Stubborn gives us +1 stewardship, +3 personal combat skill, but it does make our vassals have a -5 opinion of us, and it makes their diplomacy score -1. So traits are kind of a mixed bag. There are occasional traits which are just awful, like you don't want them in any circumstance, like incapable, or some like genetic defects, because you can have like things that pass on in this game. But most traits come with positives and negatives, and to be honest, you only have a certain amount of control of what does and does not get assigned to your characters, so try not to worry about it too much. So those are the traits. Just below that we would have modifiers, so as things happen in the game you might get a bunch of things that appear here, and just hovering over them will give you an idea of what's currently affecting your character. So you can see currently we get combat modifiers, for instance, because he's got that lead from the center trait, that, what was it, direct leader. So he's currently getting some really good combat modifiers. Then again, further down we have titles. Now the titles are what our character currently holds under his name. So that's a really bad way of describing it. Let me describe that in a better way. The title is what belongs to you. So what regions of the world are currently under your control. So we can see that Count Bethelio of Thurgau owns the county of Thurgau. Makes sense. That's why he's Count Bethelio of Thurgau. But he also has another title here that says the county of Chur. So if we click on Thurgau, we can see that we hold Rheineck, the county capital. That's right at the top of the screen that we discussed earlier. But if we click on Chur, we can see that he owns another thing here, which is, it says county capital, but then it also says underneath it, holder is of wrong type. So we actually hold a church. You can see from the picture, we actually hold a church in this particular county, which is actually giving us the ability to control this county. I keep saying province in my other videos, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same, right? It gives us the ability to control this part of the world. This is under our name, and that's because we are the highest ranking character. As a count, we outrank everyone else here. So again, we were talking about feudal hierarchy, right? So if we were to describe feudal hierarchy, here we are a count. The people who control these holdings are not counts. So if I click on the city of Davos, we should be able to click it actually says when we hover that it's under Friedrich. If we click on, in fact it's not there, if we click under the actual shield on the city itself in the left hand side, that's what I meant to click on, then we can see Friedrich's portrait, and we can click on him, and this guy, if we see his portrait, this guy is our vassal. That means he reports to us. He is our underling. And we can tell that a couple of ways. One is, in the top right, there is our portrait with the little star. The little star indicates that it's our current playable character. And we can also tell it, in this particular instance, although this would not always be here, we can tell he has this little fist, this little red fist. So that lets us know he's a powerful vassal. In this case, it lets us know he's a powerful vassal who would like to be on the council. Don't worry about that. We will discuss that later. So, yeah, he is our underling. If we click back on Count Bethelio, we can see there are a number of tabs here. So one is family, and within that we can see our son, which we've already mentioned is our heir. We can click on relations. We can see marriage ties. So here we can see this Rochildist Lothering. Just hovering over it tells us that it's our daughter-in-law, which we only have one son, as you can see from the family screen. So by a logical deduction, we can tell that she's the wife of our son. But like I said, like I just did, you can click on these portraits and it takes you to the person, shows you what the relationship is. We are her liege, even though she is married to our son, because we are landed and we are the highest ranking character. He currently isn't landed. He's the heir to getting a landed title. He would get the county of Thurgau. But he currently doesn't actually own any land. We do. We own Thurgau, and we own a church in Chur. Okay, hopefully you're following along so far. So let's move it up a level. I think we've described most of the things on this screen. So let's now click on our liege. So our liege is our boss, in effect. He's the guy who owns everything here that's highlighted in yellow. So when you click on a character, the default view shows you their entire realm, everything they hold. I should say realm is correct, but it isn't correct. I should say their what they own, just what they own, because a realm is a bigger thing. But for now, I guess let's not worry about that. So everything in yellow is what belongs to Duke Kanibi. And by belongs, I mean it reports back to him, because there is a mixture of what you own and what you control. And the reason we say that is because you'll notice inside of this yellow, we have the county of Thurgau and the county of Chur. Well, we know from looking at our character that we own Thurgau and we own Chur. So we're appearing in this, though, because much like Friedrich reports to us, we report to Duke Kanibi. So we are in Duke Kanibi's realm, whilst Friedrich is in our realm. And the hierarchy exists that way. Duke Kanibi doesn't have any interactions with Friedrich, really. He could do, but he wouldn't bother himself with somebody so unimportant. Friedrich is merely a mayor of a city, whereas we are the count of a county. Duke Kanibi is a duke of a duchy. This area here that we're looking at is a duchy. So again, you'll notice in the top right of Duke Kanibi, there is another character. He himself has an heir at the bottom. He has a wife, which we currently don't. And in the top right of Duke Kanibi's window, we can see King Carloman of Middle Francia. If we click on him, and we zoom out using the scroll wheel on our mouse, we can see that the yellow area here encompasses all of a realm called Middle Francia. And this actually is a realm at this point, because it's the top level title. So remember, we said that all those minutes ago when we finally joined into the video. The top level title of where we are right now is called Middle Francia, and the dude who is in charge is King Carloman of Middle Francia. He is the top dog of where we currently live. Now, you can go higher than a king. The next rank up is Emperor. The best place in the world to probably show Emperor right now would be the Byzantine Empire. So let's click on the Byzantine Empire. I'm going to click through the lieges until I get to them. This guy here, Basileus Constantinus V of the Byzantine Empire, is an emperor. Now, he doesn't say emperor in his title. It says that he is Basileus, and that's based on culture. So I'm going to show you very quickly how you can tell who is what when there are different cultural names. And I'm going to use Cornwall over here in England, or what would be England. It isn't England yet. It's far too early for it to be England. But I'm going to use Cornwall as a great example. If I click this province here of Cornwall, and I hover over the dude who is in there, it says King Corderly of Cornwall. But underneath it says Petty King of Cornwall. So this is the petty kingdom of Cornwall. So what does that mean? Well, in this particular case, it means that this guy is a duke. Much like our boss over here, Duke Anibi, is a duke. This guy in charge of Cornwall is also a duke, even though it says he's a king. So that can be confusing. So how can you tell the difference? Well, let's start with ourselves by clicking on Thurgau and clicking on Count Bethelio. There are a couple of things that give it away. Number one, look at the portrait for our character, and surrounding him there is a silver band with some like purple ribbon, and then also next to us, to the left, just above our coat of arms, there is, or just above our titles shield, there's a little crown, and it's got little pearls studded into it. If we click on our liege, notice that the silver border has changed to now include some blue gems, and also above his shield there's a crown that's studded with gems. So that lets you know that he's more important than we are. If we click on the liege of him, we can see this is King Carloman, and he has a little crown around his head. He's currently not crowned as a king, because otherwise he'd have a very fancy crown on his head. But he doesn't. He's just got this, I forget the name of it, but he's just got this this little crown on his head. Is it a circlet? I had this discussion earlier on in a earlier video, much later in the series, so you'll get to see my confusion there as well. But I think it's a circlet. But he just has a non-fancy, non-crowned thing on. In fact, somewhere in here he might have some kind of negative trait from being uncrowned. But yeah, that's what he has right now. However, above his title, he has this very fancy crown, very royal crown with gems and the red, like silk or velvet or whatever it would be in this kind of crown. So that's what a king looks like. If we go back over to the Byzantine Empire, and we find the emperor, notice he's got this pink and purple crown with the cross on the top and the gems all across it. So he's super important, and he's got a gold trim with studs in. The King of France has a gold trim without studs in. So that's kind of how you can tell. Those things are universal no matter where you look in the world. So back to the Petty Kingdom. Can we find somebody better to display this? Maybe in Ireland. So in Ireland we can see these guys are tribal. So this guy just has a silver rim. And this guy is a duke. He doesn't report to anybody. Let's find somebody who reports to someone. This guy is also a duke. So these guys are all like petty kings. There you go. This guy's a count. This guy's merely a count, with his silver border and the pearls at the top of the unstudded crown. His liege is a duke, even though he calls himself a king. But again, he's got this kind of crown, silver with the studs. Then we find a king who has just plain gold with the fancy crown. And then lastly, the emperor has the super fancy crown there, and then the gold with all the studs in. So hopefully I've belaboured the point just enough for you to understand that. You can tell that no matter where you go in the world, which level of the hierarchy somebody lives at. And hopefully you picked it up, but just in case you didn't, I'm going to go through the relationship. Emperors are at the top of the chain. No one is more important than them. They are equal to no one other than other emperors themselves. Below emperors are kings, so an emperor can have a king as a vassal. In turn, he can also have dukes and counts, and I guess theoretically barons, but not really. It's like you wouldn't get to that point of the game. But yeah, just think that basically emperors are at the top and everyone can be below them. And then you have kings who can have dukes and counts and I guess barons underneath them, but report into emperors. Then you have dukes. They report to kings and emperors, but they have counts as vassals and barons as vassals. And then lastly, in terms of playable characters, you have counts, which is what we are. We are literally the lowest of the low right now. We couldn't be any less important. So we are Count Bethelio of Thurgau. We report into a duke. We have barons underneath us as vassals. We have 4 vassals. So yeah, this is the lowest you can be in the game. You cannot play as a baron. So these characters are basically barons. These mayors, bishops, people in charge of like cities. People who own holdings but can't hold a county capital are the lowest character, and they're non-playable. Yeah, so we are as worse as you can be playable-wise. Unless, of course, you didn't have a title. But then if you didn't have a title, the game would end. And that's a good point to kind of mention, which is it's all about the dynasty, right? And it's all about your dynasty holding a title. If at any point your title is taken away and you don't have any titles left, that's it. The game's over. You lose. If you have lots of titles and you die and you've got no heir to pass them on to, that's it. Or should I say, no heir who is of your dynasty, because it is possible to have an heir who isn't of your dynasty. As long as it stays within your family, as long as it's within House Bethilding, we're all good. So hopefully that's all the feudal mechanics discussed. How long have we been going for? 42 of your earthly minutes. Okay, I think we've got a little bit of time to explain the alerts, and then I'm going to separately tackle the UI, I think. I originally did all this in one big video, and it's just too much. So let's just very, very quickly tackle how you would start a game of CK2. Much like other Paradox titles, they give you a raft of alerts at the top of the screen to describe the things that are going on. So we are going to address a couple of these, maybe all of them, we'll see. And then in the next video, we're going to go through all the different options that are available to you in the UI. Because we've already kind of explained the character screen and the feudal hierarchy. I don't want to overload you all in one go. So, at the top, we have an important decision that is available, which is to recruit a court physician. So if I click on recruit court physician, that opens the intrigue tab for us. Don't worry, we're going to go through that in much more detail later on. These are things that you can do. They includes decisions and plots, as well as prisoners, threats. Again, we'll go through this in greater detail. Right now, the bit that we're here for is this decision. It allows us to recruit a court physician. Basically, that's someone who makes you better when you get sick. When you start the game, you don't have somebody who's in that position. And only certain characters are able to fulfill that role. So this decision allows you to generate a character, quite literally generate a character out of thin air. So let's use this opportunity to teach you another hotkey, which is the full stop or period if you're in the United States. And that will open the find character screen. So we could, if we click select search all, we could look through all these characters. This is every single character in the game. So all characters are represented. You see this list is absolutely ginormous. I'm currently zipping through it with my scroll bar. It would take a very long time to get through everybody. So we could use this to just go find a character who already exists. But we would need somebody who has the right trait. So we could type in renowned physician, for instance, and that would return a renowned physician for us, who would be able to fulfill that particular role. Or if nobody was here to our liking, or perhaps we couldn't recruit them for stuff we'll go into later, I'm not going to go into it now, we could click this button. That would take us to the decisions tab. We could click on this little scroll here with the plus. The little green tick means you can do this event. The grey scroll with the greyed out tick means you currently don't have the preconditions that are needed to make this to do this event. So in this case, we couldn't invite a holy man to court because we don't have enough piety to do so. We have 10 piety and it would require 25. But we can always recruit a court physician where we don't have one currently hired. Okay, I'm not going to do that, and the reason I'm not going to do that is personal bias. Every single time I use the recruit court physician and generate a random character, I always get a terrible physician, or I get somebody with good stats potentially, but they always end up killing my character in sometimes a hilarious but unfortunate way. So I've just taken to using the character finder to find my own physicians. So we'll do that in a future video, but that's what that alert means. The next alert, ruler unmarried. So that's telling us if we click back on Count Bethelio, or we can actually just click on that. If this screen was closed, we could click on that alert and it will take us to where we need to go. So these alerts are quite useful. You can see here to the right of Bethelio there is a blank portrait and the scroll that says wife. So there are a couple of reasons as to why you would want a wife in this game. For me, the most important reason to have a wife is because she gives you half of her stats. So you want to find a good wife who has good stats, because she will give you half of those stats. They will be applied to your state diplomacy score, just straight up. So if you find somebody with really good stats, then you get better at administering your realm for all of the various different things, like no-brainer. So always having a wife is good because you're otherwise missing out on stats. The other really important to have a really important reason to have a wife or a husband if you're playing as a woman is it allows you to have children. You can't have a child by yourself, so you can get a wife to effectively breed, and that will create heirs for you. Because again, this is a game about a dynasty, so you want to pass on your family name to someone of your blood, and yeah, you need a wife to do that. Theoretically, that's not 100% true. Your character can have sex with people in the game who are not your wife, and you can generate. If you're not married, that creates illegitimate children, bastards in effect for this era. So you could legitimize those children, or you could not legitimize. There's options. I think we'll go into that in later videos. There are definite disadvantages to having bastard children, although there are definite advantages to having bastard children due to succession law, which we're not going to go into in this video. So yes, always having a wife, even if it's just to get her stats, is really, really useful. So we would probably want to solve this one as well in the next playthrough. Wrong type of holding in domain. That's what that word means. That the one that looks like dements, it actually is pronounced domain. So the domain effectively means like what domain means, right? We have the wrong type of holding inside of our realm. So in Chur, we already discussed, we currently have a church, and the reason that's wrong is because the type of character we are, as a count, we should hold baronies, not churches. Churches should be held by bishops. They're sometimes referred to as bishoprics. So they should be held by a religious, godly fellow, whereas a city would be held by a burgher or a mayor. Whereas baronies are held by barons, or in our case, counts. So we should hold the thing that best fits. Like we do in Thurgau, we have a castle. That's befitting of a count to hold a castle. That's the right type of place for us to own. Holding a domain of the wrong type gives you negative modifiers. So that's why the game is telling us. It's telling us maybe you want to give this holding away, because holding it means that you're getting negative modifiers. Now, in actual fact, don't worry about this particular one, at least not right now. It's more of an efficiency choice. We can perhaps see if we click on chur, you can see when we hover over the tax value, you can see that we're suffering a minus 75% negative modifier for having the wrong government type. So we're not a bishop, therefore we don't get the best out of this church. I think the same might be true of levy, or perhaps not. But yes, same from garrison size as well. So this holding in chur is not as efficient. However, if we gave away this holding right now, we would lose access to chur completely, which would be very bad. We'll discuss that in a later video. And in addition, we are still making something out of holding this. We're getting 4 gold out of it. We're not getting what we should be. We should be getting another 75% on top of that. But right now we're getting something, and something is better than nothing. So yeah, ignore that alert for now. The next one is pick an ambition. So if we click on that, it will open our character screen again. And you can see there's a couple of buttons up here. So we're going to just quickly pick the ambitions. If we click on the little thought bubble to the right of our family crest, you see a number of little pop-ups. They're a little bit tiny, but we have the ambition to create a treasury, make a friend, become a paragon of virtue, acquire a title, become a counsellor, or build a war chest. So these are just different things that we can say our character has set out to do. And you pick an ambition, and then if you meet the success criteria for that ambition, then you get a benefit from achieving it. So I'm going to pick become a counsellor. And that's basically us saying, I would like to sit on my liege's council. We're going to talk about the council later. Don't worry about that right now. But we're going to just pick that for now, and I'm actually going to click that. If we were successful, it would change the opinion of our liege of us by 10 for 5 years. We're going to talk about that in a future video. So for now, I'm just going to click on councillor. That's going to be our ambition. I'm going to click OK to confirm. That's made that pop-up go away. The next pop-up is pick a character focus. So I could click that, but it's just going to open this menu again. Right next to where we've just picked an ambition, there's this little person with 3 arrows coming out of it. If we click on that, that allows us to choose a focus. Focuses are ways that you can increase your stats, and also something that generates events within the game. So where becoming a counsellor gives us an ambition of something to set out to achieve, having a focus just allows us to influence an aspect of our character, and we get events that will fire that match the type of focus that we pick. So for instance, our character is currently really good at martial, but he's not so good at diplomacy. So I'm going to pick this one here, carousing. That's what I normally like to pick, because diplomacy is very good. It makes people like you. More on that later. So I'm going to pick carousing for now. That will give us diplomacy +3. So when I select that, you'll see our stat on the left, which is currently 8. Or at least you would once I unpause the game. It will jump up to reflect that we've now taken this carousing focus. And then the last one in the list is that there are special minor titles grantable. So the first one, when I click on that, it's going to show us this whole list. I think we're going to go through this list again in the next video, because this is already getting pretty long. Yes, we're coming up to an hour. So I'm going to go through that in the next video. But for now, we're just going to satisfy the 2 major titles that are in here. The first one is Court Physician, and the second one is Designated Regent. So I'm going to click on Court Physician. This is what we had earlier, where we had the decision to generate a character. Well, it actually turns out that we already have a character who is currently our Chancellor, who has a learning score of 17, and learning is the main stat that's required for a Court Physician. And he also has the Scholarly Theologian trait, which is, again, a trait that's required to be a Court Physician. So we're going to pick him because he's actually a really, really good character to pick for this. You'll only see characters in this list who have the ability to hold the position, so you don't need to worry too much. If the list is empty, you'll need to go find someone using the find character button by pressing dot like we did earlier, or by generating somebody via the event. Again, we'll go through this in a bit more detail, but for now let's click on Luthbrand, Bishop of Sankt Gelt. Again, if you follow the game along with me, you'll get the exact same characters as me. You might not see all the menu options that I've been clicking on. Hopefully you see the vast majority of them. Some of them are part of DLC. I'll try and stay away from the DLC where I can, but I can't honestly remember which parts are DLC now and which parts aren't. So if I say something and you see it on my screen and it doesn't exist for you, it's probably locked behind DLC. I'd advise you to go get the DLC, but of course I'm not going to force you one way or the other. That's completely up to you. Let's pick Luthbrand. So that's our court position field, and that's actually enough right now to make that pop-up go away. So let's close that and do a quick recap of what we've achieved. We have very briefly gone through the UI for our character screen. We have discussed some of these alerts up here. We've discussed where our realm is and where we sit in it, and we've also done a quick rundown along with how you find out who is who for feudal hierarchy and understanding where we sit within that, you know, where we exist within the world, and who are our betters and who are our inferiors, as it were. So I think it's coming up to an hour, so I'm going to knock it on the head there, and I think this is a reasonable first intro. The next time that we load this, I'm going to go into much more detail. We're going to go through every single one of these menu options and describe what they all mean. We're going to describe some more about the interactions between characters, and I guess any other things that jump out. There's a few things that we're actually going to do to administer our kingdom, and we'll probably even unpause the game. This is a Paradox title. If you've never played a Paradox title before, it is not uncommon to spend a good amount of time on the pause screen when you very first start a game. If you have, this will be completely familiar to you. So I'm going to end it there. It seems like a nice, neat cut. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much, guys.